Hey, what's up, guys? It's Bakes here, and thank you for joining me for this episode of my random horror reviews. Today's movie was a first time watch for myself. I'd never seen this movie before. It's a film from Spain, 1972. Today's movie is Tombs of the Blind Dead. I was aware of the Blind Dead franchise and films, but like I said, I'd never seen any of them before. This was a first time watch. And I wasn't too aware of what they were about. Obviously, just off the title, Blind Dead, you can sort of get a gist of what they're roughly going to be, but everything else I didn't know too much about or whatever. But I did know that it was part of a franchise. Obviously, you have Tombs of the Blind Dead. I know there's another one called Night of the Seagulls, which just off the title alone sounds like a creature feature, but if it's anything like Tombs of the Blind Dead, it's not going to be. There's also one, I think it's called Attack of the Blind Dead, and then there's another one that has to do with Ghost something, like maybe Ghost of the Blind Dead, Ghost something. I really don't know. All I know is that they're roughly the titles. There's four of them. I don't know what order you're meant to watch them in. I just know that this is the first of the four. And I also know that they all sort of came out like year after year, like 1972, 3, 4, and 5. So they came out pretty quickly, I guess. But like I said, this was the first one in the franchise that I watched. The rest of them I would like to get around to watching at some point. But we'll quickly go into the plot for Tombs of the Blind Dead before I go into my thoughts of this movie. So this movie opens, we have a husband and wife. They're on this trip somewhere in Spain, and the wife runs into an old friend, I think from high school or something, or university, something like that. And they get chatting, and the husband sort of invites the old friend to come along on this camping trip that they're meant to go on. So she decides to tag along, and on the train, the wife sort of gets a little bit uncomfortable with everything going on. There's sort of like this flirtatious thing going on. She's also having flashbacks to something that happened in the past. It's also a little bit vague in my head because I did watch this a handful of nights ago, but she sort of decides to dip, like the train is going, and she just goes, you know what, instead of sorting this out when we get there, I'm just going to jump off the train. So that's what she does. She jumps off the train while it's moving. The husband and her friend realize, and they're like, oh, what are you doing? And she just sort of wanders off, and she ends up at this like old rundown castle sort of thing. And she decides that she's going to spend the night there. Little does she know that that is where the tombs of the blind dead are. And she ends up sort of not surviving. That's not really a spoiler, but now the husband and her old friend are trying to figure out what happened to her and figure out the mystery of what's going on at this like old rundown castle where everyone's telling them not to go, and there's dodgy shit going on. So that's pretty much the plot for this one. So let's get into my thoughts of Tombs of the Blind Dead from 1972. So to be honest, this movie was pretty much what I expected it to be from what little I had heard about it. To simplify it to its most basic explanation, it's pretty much a zombie movie, and if you couldn't tell from the title, the zombies are blind. So I guess there's a few catches that make it a little bit different, that being one of them. So they find you via sound, I think a little bit like a Quiet Place style. So they can't see you, but if you're screaming or running around, they'll find you. They actually also ride horses and swing swords around and whatnot, because their backstory is that they were this legion of knights who were fucking around with black magic and whatever, and now they're back from the dead. And I guess with that, there's a little bit more of a supernatural angle as well, rather than just corpses resurrecting, which I understand is also supernatural, but it just adds a little bit more flair to it, supernatural flair, that being. And all those different angles I actually really thought were pretty cool and added something different that was nice instead of just having typical zombies, if that makes sense. But the backstory and lore around this group of black magic knights and the aura around this temple and grave site that they're inhabiting was actually really neat. I really dug that. I thought that was pretty cool. And the effects, especially for the time, hold up pretty good. Like the looks of the blind dead, they all look pretty rotten, and their prosthetics hold up pretty well. There's even some moments of like people catching on fire and burning and other shit like that again, for the time, hold up pretty good. Obviously, it's not as good as effects that can be done nowadays, but for the time, 1972, I thought the effects were pretty cool. I dug them. And something that did kind of make me laugh that I do want to point out, the Blind Dead, as I said, they ride around on horses. And I guess because they're meant to be like zombie horses or ghost horses or whatever, they have to make them look a little bit, grotesque or, match the vibe of the Blind Dead. But pretty much all they do is chuck these dirty sheets over the horses, so you'll just see these like zombie knights riding around flinging swords, and then just this sheet covering a horse, this dirty sheet. And I thought that was pretty funny too. But yeah, it pretty much was the vibe that I kind of expected going into this one. So getting into the story in this one, the story is simple enough. It's nothing overly mind-blowing or special. Like I said, they do a pretty solid job of adding lore and mythology and a backstory to the Blind Dead and their location. Like, that side of the story is done really well, but overall, as an entire film from start to finish, the story isn't anything overly special. It's not something that we haven't seen, done in other films and all that, so it's nothing mind-blowing on that scale, but a lot of the enjoyment that comes as a bonus to a movie like this is its charm. I can't remember if I brought it up before, but this movie is Spanish, and I just feel like there's a lot of charm that comes from a foreign movie, particularly at this time, like back in the 70s and whatever. So as a typical Spanish film of the time, or like Italian films and everything, you have the dubbing over, which, good or bad, always adds charm, though to be fair, in this movie it's actually done pretty good. I didn't find it really distracting at all. Typical of the time again, but during like attacks, fake blood being smeared and dripped over, again, just adds charm. And what I mean by that is, like, you have the prosthetic zombie arm being dragged over skin, and you can tell it's not piercing the skin, but like there's just blood being smeared. Like, it just adds charm, it adds fun, and you're like, okay, that's kind of funny. A lot of the fun also just comes from the things you would kind of expect, like what I brought up before, the zombies riding horseback and swinging swords and everything. You don't get to see that every day, so I thought that added a lot of fun as well. So moving on, there were actually a few good moments of like genuine suspense, and again, that just added to the overall fun of this movie. There's a scene where these two chicks are fighting while one of them is trying to open this door and the other one is just trying to, I guess, stop her from doing that. She's trying to open the door because old mate's locked outside while the Blind Dead are closing in on him, and he's like banging, and it was actually pretty intense. I'm like, fuck, is she gonna get there in time? I was on the edge of my seat. I thought that was pretty cool. Another super intense, suspenseful part was towards the end of this movie, there's like a final race for the train, where this one girl, she's on her feet, they're following, when I say there, I mean the Blind Dead are following on horseback, tracking her down, and she gets to the side of the train, a guy jumps out to help her, and then she just pretty much forgets how to walk, and not only that, like, goes limp, and the guy is pretty much doing all the work to help her. She's like screaming, help me, and he's just like carrying dead weight. I thought that was so fucking funny, but super intense as well. And to look back, it's actually crazy how suspenseful I found those scenes, because to be honest, I didn't really care for any of our characters in this movie. Not saying that I hated the characters or they were bad characters or anything, I just didn't have an attachment to any of them, or, grew a heart towards any of them. But all of those scenes, like, as I said, I was pretty much on the edge of my seat for all those intense parts. Going back to that scene, as I said, towards the end, she's making this final dash for this train that's going by. She's on her feet, the Blind Dead are following on horseback, and she's screaming, help me. This guy jumps out of the train to give her a hand, and she just goes dead weight, forgets how to run. I was literally screaming at the TV. I had a beer with me, I had to like put it on the floor. I'm like, what the fuck? She's like not helping at all. She's like screaming, help. Bitch, you just fucking sprinted like a mile, and now you're like, yeah, nah, that's enough, and just goes limp. I thought that was so fucking funny. But on that note, the end of this movie, where the Blind Dead are sort of coming in on this train and closing in, I thought that was pretty fucking cool. I thought, especially for the time as well, had a bit of balls about it. I thought that was pretty cool. So yeah, another high note for there. So to wrap this one up, I thought this was a pretty fun, simple watch. Didn't blow me away, but definitely kept me engaged the whole way through. I was thoroughly entertained. Like I said, most of the fun comes from this being a product of being a foreign film of the times, with story points. The movie starting off with that chick just barrel rolling herself off the train because she feels uncomfortable. Like, that was so bizarre, but story points like that just kept it fun. The dubbing, the vibe, the effects, all of that. And then add in these zombie knights who drink blood and ride on horses and swing swords around. I mean, take my money. That's all pretty cool. No characters I really cared about, like I said, but that didn't really bother me at all. I thought there were a few stale moments of shit sort of repeating, as in like they go and do something, go home that night, and then just go and do the same thing again, sort of a back and forth, but overall didn't, take too much away from my final score, which I'll get into in a second. But good lore and backstory and setting for where the tombs are placed, and then, the story behind these Legion of Knights who were doing this black magic and whatever. I thought that was pretty cool. So, getting into a rating, I'm going to give this movie for now, a 7 out of 10. I can definitely see this one going higher over time. Just a fun watch, I really did enjoy this one going into it. And, once it was over, I was like, yeah, I'd definitely like to check out the other 3 movies, if I ever get the chance to find a copy of them, I'll definitely pick them up. So, Tombs of the Blind Dead, if you've seen this one before, let me know your thoughts of it in the comments below. And also let me know which ones are the better ones of the sequels. Obviously, I'll try and watch them in order. I'm not sure if it's necessary. Like I said, I actually don't know the order. I think Attack of the Blind Dead is next, so maybe I'll try and find a copy of that, but let me know your thoughts of Tomb, if any of the sequels are any good, and I'll see you for another video soon, guys. Thank you again for joining me, as always.